When you think of super pricey colors, gold, silver, and purple probably come to mind. But back in Pompeii, blue was the real showstopper. Known as Egyptian blue and later renamed Pompeian blue, this color was total luxury, glamorously coating walls in ancient Egypt as far back as 2500 BCE. And in Pompeii, the demand was so high that blue could cost more than even the ridiculously expensive purple. Finding a blue artifact from Pompeii is not easy, let alone a whole room. But in May 2024, archaeologists finally uncovered a completely blue room filled with murals, featuring female figures and symbols of the four seasons.
Oh wow, this is the blue room?
This gem was actually discovered ages ago during the Bourbon era, but it took until recently to finish a full excavation. The blue room isn't huge, about 86 square feet, but don't forget that vibrant blue is rare for Pompeian frescoes, usually saved for the fanciest spots. Experts think this room may have been a sanctuary for rituals or sacred stuff. Among the finds were bronze jugs, lamps, and 15 hefty amphorae. Amphorae were the Tupperware of ancient Rome, perfect for transporting liquids like olive oil, beverages, or garum, an infamous fermented fish sauce that Romans couldn't get enough of. Their tapered design meant they had to either stand on a rack or be buried in the ground, but that shape made shipping them really efficient. Also, the archaeologists found there were building materials for renovations and a ridiculous number of empty oyster shells. While you might think this room hosted some fancy shindigs with oysters and gallons of beverages in those amphoras, in reality, the shells weren't even leftovers from a posh dinner party. Instead, experts believe they were ground up to mix with plaster and mortar. The next find was unearthed around 2 decades ago, but the scientists only realized it in 2024. They had dug up the oldest cheese ever, clocking in at a whopping 3,600 years. The previous record holder was only 3,200 years old, found in an Egyptian tomb of some big shot named Thutmose. When they discovered that younger cheese, they found broken jars with this solid, whitish mass inside. It took some serious sleuthing to confirm it was cheese and not some ancient science experiment gone wrong. But let's go back to this 3,600-year-old cheese. It wasn't just sitting around like any old lump. It was actually a fashion statement. It was found in the tomb with the mummy of a young woman from northwestern China. She had the cheese hanging around her neck like some sort of dairy bling. Now let's talk taste. When experts were asked if they'd try the cheese, their answer was a swift no way. So basically, nobody's diving in to find out if it's pungent or not. But thanks to some fancy tech, they can analyze flavors. But even if they had dared to try, I bet it's nothing to write home about since it's as hard as rock now. Scientists figured out this cheese was likely kefir cheese, made from fermenting milk with kefir grains and had both goat and cow milk in it. Funny enough, the ladies whose tomb it was found in belonged to the Xiaohe people, who were probably lactose intolerant. But don't fret. Despite their limited plant options, they could still enjoy cheese since this kefir delicacy had surprisingly low lactose levels. Remember when everything felt brighter? The grass greener, people friendlier, and trees looking regal? Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating about the grass and the folks, but not the trees. In 2024, some ancient plant fossils from New Brunswick, Canada, are making waves. They uncovered Sanfordiaculus densifolia, a tree over 350 million years old. It sported a trunk, flaunting over 250 massive leaves, some up to 5 feet long. Instead of a classic crown, it had a bottle brush appearance on a slim trunk just 6.3 inches wide. It's like this tree went to the gym and skipped leg day for leaf gains. Typically, ancient trees are depicted as basic trunks, but this one is a real standout. It's somewhat similar to today's ferns and palms, though palms came later. These fossils are well preserved, buried in an ancient fault lake after an earthquake. While many might just think, cool tree, scientists are excited. This discovery helps them piece together our planet's evolution over millions of years. I get it, those blue rooms, ancient cheese, and trees aren't exactly inspiring much hope for the future. But I've got something that might just change the game. In 2024, scientists discovered a new theoretically habitable planet called Gliese 12b. It's a bit smaller than Earth, but bigger than Venus, and is orbiting a mellow red dwarf star about 40 light-years away in the Pisces constellation. This star is just 27% the size of our Sun, and 60% as hot, which puts Gliese 12b in the Goldilocks zone, where liquid water could actually exist, even with its speedy 12.8-day orbit. If it's got no atmosphere, the surface temperature is about 107 degrees Fahrenheit, so if you're used to Arizona summers, you'll be just fine. The only problem is that Gliese 12b is 12 parsecs away, and sec here doesn't mean a quick second. With our fastest spacecraft, a trip would take around 225,000 years. To put it in perspective, if we imagine a regular human lifespan of 100 years, which is already slightly exaggerated, it will take about 2,250 generations to get there. Still, it's nice to know we have Gliese 12b on deck in case things go south here on Earth. And even if we never actually get there, studying it with the James Webb Space Telescope might help unravel the mystery of why Earth stayed livable while Venus didn't. Archaeologists in Egypt have made an exciting discovery. They found the upper half of a huge statue of Ramses II. This 12.5-foot limestone piece was uncovered in Hermopolis, now Ashmounein, and it lines up perfectly with the lower part found in 1930. It took almost 100 years to finish the puzzle. The statue shows Ramses seated, wearing a crown and a headdress with a cobra, symbolizing his rule over both Upper and Lower Egypt. The back of the statue is covered in hieroglyphs, listing the king's numerous titles, highlighting his status as one of ancient Egypt's most powerful pharaohs. Combining the upper and lower pieces would create a statue nearly 23 feet tall. You probably know the Statue of Liberty was a French gift, but did you know that the famous Venetian lions were actually made in China and not Italy? Back in 1295, Marco Polo returned to Venice from a place called Cathay, we now know it as China, and shared some wild stories about everything from paper money to coal and even Kublai Khan's swanky palace in Xanadu. While some people back then rolled their eyes at his tales, modern scholars are still raising their eyebrows a bit. Despite the skepticism, Polo is a key figure connecting Europe to ancient China. Now, some recent research suggests Venice and China were already well connected before Polo's trip. A prime example? The Bronze Lion of Venice in St. Mark's Square. Researchers from the University of Padua believe that it actually came from Chinese copper around the lower Yangtze River more than 3,000 years ago, all due to a chemical analysis they ran in 2024. The winged lion became Venice's symbol between 1261 and 1264, probably even before Polo's adventures. Experts point out its resemblance to the Tang Dynasty tomb guardians, which hint it might have had a makeover on its way to Venice. 2024 is not only the year of scientific discoveries, but also the treasure hunt year. A 2-foot-tall bronze statue of the Greek deity Diana, once a fixture on the Titanic's fireplace mantle, was discovered during a recent underwater expedition. Discovering this statue was like finding a needle in a haystack, except the haystack is 2.5 miles deep in the ocean. It's just one of the many art pieces maritime archaeologists have been looking for among the Titanic's wreckage. It was more than just a luxury liner. It was filled with art treasures, from a 1912 Renault to this stunning statue inspired by a piece at the Louvre.
Not many civilizations are as mysterious as ancient Egypt, a powerful empire that lasted over 3,000 years. It gave us pyramids that still stand and myths that still inspire. It's one of the most explored places on Earth, yet somehow we still find exciting stuff. In Abydos, archaeologists just uncovered a 3,600-year-old royal tomb It's huge. It has golden hieroglyphs of deities covering the entrance, but the pharaoh's name? It's not there. It's missing. Who was this ruler, and what new chapter could this open in Egypt's story? If there's one place in Egypt where the line between life and demise feels thinner, it's Abydos. To the ancient Egyptians, this was sacred ground. They believed it was the burial place of Osiris, the god who literally passed away, had his remains separated, and came back to life to rule the underworld. Because of that, Abydos became Egypt's spiritual gathering place. Pharaohs built amazing temples here, like the Temple of Seti, famous for its King's List, a wall that has the names of 76 pharaohs carved in it. Pilgrims came from across Egypt, leaving offerings and participating in Osiris festivals, where his demise and rebirth were ritually reenacted. It wasn't just symbolic worship, it was Egypt's version of Comic-Con. But instead of cosplaying superheroes, people reenacted gods coming back to life. Obviously, pharaohs competed to be buried as close to Osiris as possible. Abydos became part cemetery, part holy city, part afterlife insurance policy. Fast forward thousands of years, and we still uncover remarkable stuff around Abydos. That's the case with the recently discovered tomb. In early 2025, a joint team of researchers from the US and Egypt decided to dig beneath a rocky rise ominously called Anubis Mountain. You remember Anubis, the jackal-headed deity who guarded cemeteries. The uncovered royal burial was hidden 23 feet below the surface. Sadly, even though it eluded archaeologists for so long, robbers had already taken away with treasures ages ago. They could definitely tell this was a tomb of someone super important. Similar to how you can walk around a mansion with no furniture but still deduce that someone rich must have lived there. The chamber had mud brick vaults rising over 16 feet. That's taller than a female giraffe standing upright. For something built 36 centuries ago, it still felt enormous. However, when you remember that Egyptians were masters of architecture, nothing seems surprising. So no treasures, no golden mask, and sadly, no name. The cartouche that should have spelled the king's identity was unreadable. Egyptian tombs usually bragged about who was inside. In ancient Egypt, a cartouche was basically a big oval name tag for kings wrapped in hieroglyphs. Think of them as VIP passes that worked in both this life and the next. Without it, your soul couldn't check into the afterlife hotel. That's because to the Egyptians, your name, your Ren, wasn't just so your teacher could distinguish you from kids with the same haircut. It was a core part of who you were. As long as your Ren survived, so did you. To have your name forgotten was considered a fate worse than passing away. A soul cannot journey without a name. That's why you'd see cartouches all over the place, on temples, obelisks, jewelry, statues, and tomb walls. It wasn't there just for the marketing. It kept the pharaoh's presence front and center everywhere you looked. Imagine building a massive tomb only for 3,600 years later to walk in and go, who is this guy again? Not cool at all. That's why it's fair to imagine our nameless pharaoh haunting the robbers for all eternity. So yeah, cartouche was considered very significant. One of the most famous and mind-blowing examples comes from the tomb of Thutmose III. His burial chamber and sarcophagus were literally shaped like a cartouche. In other words, the entire room was a living architectural symbol of his name. Thankfully, in the recently discovered tomb, not everything was erased. Painted in golden hues at the entrance were two familiar guardians, deities Isis and Nephthys. Isis was the magician who stitched Osiris back together and breathed life into him. Nephthys, her sister, was the eternal mourner and protector of the mummy. Together, they promised that whoever rested here would not face the afterlife alone, and it's one additional proof of the importance of the mysterious pharaoh. So, who could this be? To answer that, we need to go down history lane. This tomb dates back to Egypt's messy chapter called the Second Intermediate Period. Instead of one ruler in charge, the country had many rival kingdoms, each with its own little power base, like a real-life Egyptian version of Game of Thrones. And right in the middle of that chaos was Abydos. For a while, it was home to its own line of kings, the so-called Abydos dynasty. Those weren't the pyramid builders everyone knows, and that's why they're so mysterious. They left behind almost nothing. No great monuments, no sprawling cities, just fragments of names on broken blocks. For centuries, many scholars even doubted they existed at all. That sorta changed in 2014, when archaeologists uncovered the tomb of Senebkay, one of those shadowy kings. Now, everything we know about Senebkay points to him having quite a story to tell. His bones revealed 18 deep wounds, the kind you get in battle. He had blows to his skull, back, and hands, and likely lost his life fighting, making him one of the few pharaohs we know who sadly fell in combat. His tomb was modest, with reused artifacts from earlier kings, but it delivered one priceless thing: proof. Until Senebkay, the Abydos dynasty was just a theory. With him, it became real. And that's why the new discovery could be a big deal. The newly uncovered royal tomb at Abydos shares the same layout and style as Senebkay's. It has limestone chambers, mud brick vaults, and protective deities, although it's much bigger. Which again raises the possibility that we're looking at an even earlier, more powerful ruler of Abydos. Whoever he was, he wanted to be remembered alongside the greats. Which is ironic, because it seems that history tried erasing him. Perhaps additional findings alongside his tomb could tell us more. Yes, there's more, and it's actually pretty cool. Not far from Abydos, in the village of Banawit, archaeologists uncovered a Roman-era pottery workshop. Yeah, you heard that right, a pottery factory close to a pharaoh's burial ground. The site had huge clay kilns, storage rooms, and even broken shards called ostraca. They were basically ancient sticky notes. Except instead of shopping lists, those had receipts scratched onto them in Greek and Demotic Egyptian. Little records of everyday transactions, the kind of thing you'd never expect to find near a lost dynasty king. Honestly, the potters missed a chance. Forget boring receipts. They should have been selling Osiris's mugs and Anubis figurines to pilgrims and tourists. But that's not all. It seems that centuries later, during the medieval period, the same ground became a cemetery. Archaeologists found mud brick graves with skeletal remains. This could mean that Abydos kept its aura of significance for hundreds of years after the age of pharaohs. So why this hill again and again? Is this place really a getaway to the afterlife? It is, after all, the very place where Osiris is said to rest. That belief lingered like a shadow for thousands of years, strong enough to pull in pharaohs and later medieval families. Different rituals, same sacred ground. Although, to be fair, the Romans weren't here for Osiris. They came to make pots. The story of Abydos is not over. The excavations will continue, and who knows what else could be discovered in the future. Today, archaeologists are armed with tools that are basically X-ray glasses for the desert. Every scan could reveal a hidden chamber, or if we're lucky, finally give our nameless pharaoh his wren back to him. In fact, I became strangely invested in finding out who he was. So let's hope for some news soon. It's only a matter of time. Do you have your own theories? Let me know.
Well, this eerie Lake Huron discovery may be that it possibly contains the remnants of an entire civilization. Whoa, wait, sounds like Atlantis, right? Well, not exactly. But if there really had been an ancient underwater civilization here, it must have been a pretty advanced one. Around 10,000 years ago, two sharp glassy flakes broke off a stone tool and landed on the ground unnoticed. They stayed buried there for thousands of years, until 2013. Then scientists pulled up a small chunk of mud, about the size of a milk carton, from the bottom of Lake Huron, 100 feet underwater. Inside the mud, they found those same two flakes made of obsidian, a shiny black volcanic glass that forms when lava cools quickly. After careful testing, they realized these flakes came from Central Oregon, which is quite a distance, about 2,500 miles away. They found this prehistoric Great Lakes site on the Alpena Amberley Ridge, an underwater landform that once connected what's now Michigan and Ontario. Back then, it was dry land. Early humans used it to build traps for animals like caribou as the Ice Age faded and the Great Lakes began to form. Now, obsidian was the high-tech material of ancient times. It's super sharp and perfect for making tools. If you study the flakes carefully, it's obvious that humans made them. You can see where they struck them and the feathered edges that come from being carefully chipped. That means people were not only crafting tools here, but they also had access to obsidian that came from incredibly far away. It was likely possible through a huge trade network that spanned across the continent. For over 100 years, people have guessed that ancient societies might have existed beneath the Great Lakes, but no one had proof. That's why work on this submerged archaeological site is so important. A team of researchers has been trying to learn more about the 10,000-year-old ruins and the civilization that left them behind for over a decade now. Lake Huron's icy water acted like a time capsule that helped preserve things for thousands of years. So far, researchers have found not only unique stone tools, but also ancient trees with roots still intact and underwater peat bogs that preserved seeds and leaves. It was like an Ice Age version of Pompeii, a scene frozen in time. These discoveries are also helping scientists create new technologies and ways to do underwater archaeology. They've engaged sonars, underwater robots, and divers so far. Now, it's pretty cool that the tools they found on the Alpena Amberley Ridge were way smaller than other tools from the same era found nearby. That might mean a different group of people lived here, and they had their own unique way of life. Even the peat bogs they found, which are about 9,500 years old, hold secrets. They're full of pine needles, seeds, and leaves that could reveal what the environment was like back then. Usually stuff like this breaks down quickly on land, but the cold freshwater preserved it. The Michigan team is working with scientists in Cambridge, England, to extract DNA from the remains. If it works, it could finally confirm what animals lived there, and maybe even more. There are still years of discovery on this prehistoric Great Lakes site ahead. Another famous submerged archaeological site is the lost city of Pavlopetri. Archaeologists think it is the oldest sunken city in the world they've found and made official so far. Pavlopetri is around 5,000 years old. That means it existed even before the legendary Greek heroes in Homer's stories. Scientists first spotted it way back in 1904, and then mostly forgot about it until 1967, when Nicholas Fleming rediscovered it. He described it as a Bronze Age city now lying under about 10 to 13 feet of water. A year later, he returned with a team of scientists to study the ruins. Over 6 weeks, using just hand tapes and a basic grid, they managed to map out the city. They found that it covered almost 1,000 feet by 500 feet and had at least 15 buildings, courtyards, 5 streets, 2 tombs, and around 37 small stone graves. They also found signs that the ruins continued onto the nearby island of Pavlopetri itself. They dug up some amazing pottery, obsidian, and chert blades, and even a tiny bronze figurine that may date all the way back to 2800 BCE. Most of the buildings, though, came from the period between 1650 and 1180 BCE. Then scientists left the site alone again until 2009, when a super team of researchers launched a new 5-year project to really dive deep into the history of Pavlopetri. This time, they had digital mapping tools and better diving equipment, so they could explore and even excavate underwater. They found another 97,000 square feet of buildings, including a large hall and hidden streets. Plus, they dug up even more pottery that showed people had been living in the city from about 3000 BCE to 1100 BCE, and that the city once had a population of 500 to 2,000 people. No one knows for sure how the city ended up underwater, but many scientists think it was because of an earthquake, maybe around 1000 BCE, or even as late as 375 CE. Because it's the oldest underwater city ever found, Some people even believe Pavlopetri might have inspired the legend of Atlantis. Another contestant for the Atlantis title lies near Japan. Back in 1986, a local diver was exploring the waters near the Ryukyu Islands when he found a giant structure made of perfectly shaped steps and sharp edges. It was 82 feet underwater. Today, the Yonaguni Monument is one of the most mysterious underwater sites on the planet. The structure is nearly half a football field in size. It looks like a massive stone pyramid with layers of platforms and steps stacked one on top of another. No one really knows where it came from or who built it. Some experts think the monument might be more than 10,000 years old, which would make it older than the Egyptian pyramids. One theory is that it could be the last remains of a lost civilization called Mu, a mythical Pacific society kind of like Atlantis. Others believe an ancient culture that lived in Japan as early as 12,000 BCE might have built it. But many scientists and geologists are skeptical about this possible underwater ancient civilization, even though Yonaguni has narrow passageways, arched openings, and right angles that almost look like city blocks. They say that the site looks a lot like natural rock formations, like the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, for example. The whole monument is still connected to a bigger chunk of bedrock, which means it wasn't built piece by piece. And the way the layers of rock are stacked probably has more to do with earthquakes and tectonic movement. It's located in the very active Pacific Ring of Fire. One marine geologist kept going back down there, and every time he found something new. He says he spotted tool marks in the rock, symbols carved into stone faces, and even rock formations shaped like animals. He believes these carvings point to a culture that came from mainland Asia. He said he had identified 10 different structures off Yonaguni, including a ruined castle, a triumphal arch, 5 temples, and even a huge museum. These buildings seem to be connected by roads and channels, and some parts are surrounded by what could be giant stone walls. The explorer believes the city is at least 5,000 years old, based on stalactites found in underwater caves nearby, which would have only formed after the caves flooded. His supporters say they have never seen an earthquake create shapes like this, above or below water. But skeptics blame it all on erosion and insist that whirling underwater currents and sea creatures left holes in the rock. Now, if you want to form your own opinion about it, the spot is open for visitors, and it's definitely a super fun diving experience.
Archaeologists recently found something fascinating from a forgotten Maya kingdom, a tomb hidden in a collapsing pyramid. Inside, there was a king buried for 1,700 years, a jade mask that looks almost human, but not quite. And all this thanks to the looters who missed it by just 6 feet. They stumbled upon it in 2022 in the dense jungles near the border of Guatemala, Mexico, and Belize. In Mayan times, this little place used to be called Xochitlam. It's a lost city, half swallowed by jungle. This place meant pretty much nothing compared to other big Mayan cities, like Tikal or Teotihuacan, or so we thought. The team found a tomb of a Mayan ruler. The artifacts, the names of kings, all this revealed that Xochitlam wasn't just some tiny village. It was a pretty important place for that culture, and what they found inside that tomb may rival the treasures of any Maya metropolis. The tomb's ceiling had collapsed long ago, but the offerings were still inside and remained intact even after centuries. They recovered over 16 spondylus shells. These things were used by the ancient elite for power and rituals. That meant that whoever the tomb was related to, it was someone wealthy, of high status, who got themselves a ceremonial burial. Archaeologists also found carved femur bones. They were etched with hieroglyphs and names. Maya literally wrote their history in human remains. Researchers want to dive super deep and get a DNA analysis on the bones. Maybe that will help uncover familial ties, origins, or health problems these people might have faced. And most important of all, the mosaic jade mask. It was pieced together from luminous green tiles into an expression that feels almost human, almost alive. A lot of people were joking that it's just like Jim Carrey's mask in the famous movie. But it wasn't a magical artifact. That was the face of a forgotten Maya king, staring out at us after 1,700 years of silence. His name was etched into the femur bones, Itzam Kokaj Balam. Historians think this might be the ruler who reigned around 350 BCE. Unfortunately, this period is super underdocumented. We barely know anything about those times, but it looks like he was pretty important to the locals. One of the bones even showed a carved figure holding a deity's severed head. The deity's head looks exactly like the jade mask. Perhaps this was supposed to be the king himself, defeating some mythological villain. Other inscriptions mention the king's father and grandfather. That links Xochitlam to the mighty Maya capitals we mentioned, Tikal and Teotihuacan. Tikal was once the beating heart of the Maya world. It was a fascinating megapolis. A city rose from the Guatemalan lowlands with towering step pyramids that scraped the sky. That place was home to tens of thousands of people. It was also a hub of art, astronomy, and culture. The rulers were worshipped almost as living deities. Their deeds were carved into stelae that still stand amid the howler monkeys. Teotihuacan was located even further north. Now that was a mystery of another kind. It wasn't really Mayan, but rather Central Mexican. But still, that was a true metropolis, one of the largest cities in the world during its time. It was most famous for its Avenue of the Dead and colossal structures like the Pyramid of the Sun. It was a rich cultural center that had a worldwide influence. For centuries, both Tikal and Teotihuacan seemed to have completely different cultures. Tikal was a flourishing city-state where people loved reading, astronomy, and beautiful architecture. Teotihuacan was a titanic militaristic superpower. Two big centers of Mexico, separated by 600 miles of jungle and mountains. Compared to these imperial capitals, Xochitlam was a whisper. But it looked like this Itzam guy from the tomb wasn't just a ruler of a random village. He seemed to have political ties in ancient Mesoamerica. The craziest part is that we almost lost this piece of history, all because of the looters. At some point in the past, grave robbers had tunneled dangerously close. They stopped digging just 6.5 feet away from the tomb. That's just like in that meme with the diamonds. Sometimes you stop digging right before you hit it big. But in our case, thank heavens they didn't get there first. That's how close we came to losing a piece of history. In an almost poetic irony, it was the looters' tunnels themselves that led Estrada Belli's team to the site. Archaeologists have been looking around and using the so-called LiDAR technology. That's basically laser beams shot from high above, which help them map the spot. It's like taking X-rays of the jungle floor. And that's when they found the little signs of intrusion. They quickly realized that if someone was digging here, they were probably looking for something important. Without the failing looters, they might have walked past a discovery. In any case, archaeologists want to keep searching. They might even find more chambers buried inside the abandoned pyramid. We just keep finding mysterious things related to the Maya. Recently, buried deep within the ruins of Tikal, archaeologists found a house, and in that house, a limestone altar. It was covered in vibrant murals of red, yellow, and black. What's weird is that this build wasn't made by Maya. It was unmistakably Teotihuacan in style. And just like the tomb from before, it was made about 1,700 years ago. The altar was discovered inside a Maya-era residence known as Group 6DX7. It stood 3.5 by 6 feet right in the center of the home. That was very typical for Teotihuacan traditions. It bore a mural of the storm god. That was also a central deity in the Teotihuacan pantheon. But this altar depicted no kings and no rulers. That's very weird. As we said, Maya worshipped and honored their dynasties and political power, putting them pretty much everywhere, like some merch. But instead, this altar worshipped the deities alone, and it did so in the heart of Maya's main capital, Tikal. When archaeologists dived deeper, they saw it as unmistakable proof that Teotihuacanos not only came to Tikal, They thrive there. This house wasn't some trade outpost. People actually lived in it. Teotihuacanos built homes, practiced their rituals, and left their deities behind in this city. And Maya seemed to be chill about that. Researchers think this was a home for some elite people from Teotihuacan, or maybe it belonged to Mayans who practiced Teotihuacano culture and deeply respected it. But it might be something darker than a simple, friendly multiculturalism. The two cities weren't in the best relationship. There was some tension, maybe even surveillance. The house and the altar were probably built around 300 to 400 BCE. That was a period when Tikal was rising in power. This might have caught the attention of the mighty empire to the north. It's almost as if Mayans poked the beast. By 400 to 450 BCE, that attention may have become something sinister. The altar could have actually been the symbol of domination. Had the Maya of Tikal truly welcomed their guests, or did they come here and bluntly started building foreign altars in sacred spaces? Did Teotihuacan use this as some kind of soft invasion? In that case, it would make sense for Mayans to destroy that place or vandalize it somehow. Mayans regularly buried their buildings and rebuilt on top of them. But for some reason, this altar remained untouched. Mayans found it and buried it with the surrounding buildings as they were. No vandalism, no destruction, no rebuilding even. Looks like they had some complicated feelings about Teotihuacans. It was a time when cultures clashed, fused, overlapped, and possibly spied on each other. Perhaps one day we'll learn more about what really happened among these ancient civilizations.
The lost city of Atlantis may have actually been found. No, really. Two researchers were working in the waters off the coast of Cuba when they discovered the ruins of what looked like an ancient submerged city. That happened about 20 years ago, and yet no one really talks about it today. It's like the authorities just took the research, locked it away in some top-secret room, and decided no one else should know about it. But why? Well, I'm going to tell you. Back in 2001, Paulina Zalitsky, a marine engineer, and her husband, Paul Weinswig, were hired to explore the waters off Cuba's western coast. They had two main objectives: to search for old shipwrecks, possibly hiding treasures like gold and jewels, and to locate valuable oil and natural gas deposits deep underwater. They were using a sonar. Basically, this equipment is like a sound-based radar. It sends out sound waves underwater, and when those waves hit something, like a sunken ship, they bounce back. The system can figure out where and how far the object is just by listening to the echo. So, the couple was scanning the seafloor with this equipment more than 2,000 feet below the surface. And then, out of nowhere, they found something way more interesting than gold or oil. They found stones. Not just any stones. I'm talking huge, perfectly arranged stones. Kind of like a mini version of the pyramid at Chichen Itza, or even better, like a bunch of tiny submerged Chichen Itzas. Yep, they saw that, or at least they think they did. The thing is, sonar doesn't work like a camera. It definitely doesn't record video or take actual pictures underwater. What it does do is create images using sound. And those images are usually just outlines or shapes, kind of like a blurry black and white sketch. It shows you where things are, but not exactly what they look like. And that's exactly what happened back then. The equipment started producing images of these perfectly organized stone structures, and it really looked like some kind of urban development. I mean, the site was just too organized, too symmetrical to be just random rocks. But it sounded too good to be true. I mean, this discovery could totally change everything we know about ancient civilizations on the American continent. So the scientists decided it would be too irresponsible to announce anything without finding more evidence first. And that's why they decided to go back to that same spot. This time they sent down an underwater remotely operated vehicle to actually see what was going on beneath the sea. See? This robot was basically an underwater cameraman. And yep, it confirmed it. There was definitely something strange down there. It looked like an ancient city made of huge, smooth blocks of granite. These rocks were about 8 feet by 10 feet. Some were in pyramid shapes, others were circular. Some seemed to be deliberately cut and then stacked on top of each other, while others appeared isolated from the rest. Together, they looked like they were forming corridors and outlines of rooms. It was like finding large buildings in the middle of an underwater desert. These images were enough for Zalitsky to seal the deal. Back then, she confirmed that this amazing structure, her words, could have been a large urban center. Again, her words. Then the couple started to speculate. They said that these structures were probably built more than 6,000 years ago, which would make them older than the Great Pyramids of Egypt. It's even older than the famous Maya, the civilization that used to live in the Americas and is known for their ancient and advanced temples. The research also suggested that these structures might belong to a civilization that lived on the American continent thousands of years ago, and that we didn't even know about. This supposed civilization once thrived on a 100-mile land bridge connecting Cuba to Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula. But then, something catastrophic happened. According to their theory, the Earth's faults shifted beneath the surface, leading to a massive earthquake. Then, in the blink of an eye, the entire bridge was destroyed. The land was swallowed up by the sea and ended up at the bottom of the ocean, and this civilization disappeared. Of course, all the connections to the famous Atlantis myth got the media totally hooked on the story. News websites ran headlines like "Lost City of the Caribbean Found" and "Atlantis Found in Cuba." So, could that really be Atlantis? I mean, did they finally find the remains of this supposedly super advanced and lost civilization? Well, it's hard to say. From the start, part of the scientific community wasn't buying into the story too much. First, there's the issue of the date. Saying that this civilization existed at this spot at least 6,000 years ago just wasn't very credible. Then, some European archaeologists argued that the stones they found using sonar might just be natural limestone, not perfectly sculpted granite. And third, it was too deep. Even with the whole theory of earth faults opening up and swallowing everything, it's still hard to explain how an entire city ended up so deep in the ocean. For comparison, there is Heraklion, a real ancient Egyptian port city that got submerged. Today, it is only about 19 feet underwater. But this so-called Atlantis city is at depths between 2,000 and 2,460 feet. See how that's totally different, right? People think it would have taken around 50,000 years for such stone structures to sink to the depth where they are said to be found. And according to experts, none of the known civilizations from that long ago had the ability to build such structures. But for Zalitsky, yes, it was possible. She still believed in the fault theory to explain how this land ended up at the bottom of the ocean so fast. Big movements of the Earth's tectonic plates are usually followed by things like volcanoes and earthquakes. So, according to her, it's a powerful event, and the island sinking could have happened really quickly. This earthquake theory could also explain why some of the megaliths on the seafloor look organized while others don't. But to really prove any of this, they needed a specially designed robot to go down there again and take samples of the rocks and sediment. That way, they could figure out how old the rocks were and maybe even find signs of human life, like carvings, sculptures, or artifacts. The problem is, drilling into those structures isn't easy. They look like granite, and drilling granite that deep underwater is seriously tough. And more than anything, they needed money to do it, a lot of it. So maybe they just never got the funding. Because even with all that initial hype, no further explorations or studies were ever reported. And that lack of follow-up sparked a lot of speculation. Some people even wondered if the story got shut down on purpose, like maybe the authorities wanted to keep something top secret. As if this underwater city was built by some kind of higher extraterrestrial being, and they just don't want us to find out. But truth be told, the strongest argument for saying, yeah, that is definitely a lost city, is that nature supposedly couldn't have built something so symmetrical. Geologists did try to find natural explanations, or at least similar examples from other parts of the world, but they came up short. Still, just because we haven't found a clear natural explanation doesn't mean there isn't one. Nature can create some pretty wild and unexpected stuff, so honestly, that whole too perfect to be natural angle is kind of a weak argument. What most likely happened is that experts just weren't convinced it was actually a sunken city. And that's probably why no one followed up on their work. Over time, the buzz faded, the story disappeared, and the site slipped back into silence. And without more data, the true nature of those underwater formations off Cuba's coast is still a mystery.
One more step in the wrong direction, and the crossbows will release their arrows. If you open the wrong door, you'll end up in a river of mercury. It's almost impossible to get out of this place, but it is even more difficult to get here. No, this is not a location from an adventure movie, but a treasure hunter. This is a real giant tomb filled with traps and streams of toxic mercury. And it's not somewhere deep in the Amazon jungle or an unknown island. This tomb is located in central China, near the city of Xi'an. And you know what the coolest thing is? This tomb was built more than 2,000 years ago. And even now, in the 21st century, we still don't know how to get there. But let's start from the beginning. Many of you have probably heard of terracotta statues. Thousands of clay sculptures of people. Those statues were first found in 1974, when a group of peasants were digging decks near Xi'an. They found a detailed human-sized figure, and that was 1 out of 1,000. Each figure was made as realistic as possible. Each of them was unique and had its distinctive details. More than 50 years have passed, and scientists are still digging up these sculptures. The number has already exceeded 8,000. But what are they doing there? What is their purpose? Terracotta sculptures are kinda guarding the tomb of Emperor Qin Shi Huang. He was such an influential man in China that he wasn't just buried in a tomb. His servants created a giant coffin complex the size of a small town. So, if thousands of clay guards symbolically protect this place, it's difficult to imagine what's in the center of this ancient, gigantic tomb. But first, let's find out who Qin Shi Huang was, and then move on to the dangerous traps. He was the first son of the ruler of the kingdom of Qin. It was one of the 6 kingdoms that existed on the territory of modern China. In 2059 BCE, when Qin Shi Huang was born, those 6 kingdoms were independent and separated from one another. Moreover, there was a strong conflict between them that lasted for more than 200 years. But Qin Shi Huang turned out to be the man who managed to conquer and unite all these kingdoms. He became more than just a king. He became the first emperor of China. But how did he complete a seemingly impossible task? Natural disasters, clever strategy, tactics, and skills helped him to conquer the 6 kingdoms. Scientists are still arguing about some of the details of how this happened. All that can be said is that Qin Shi Huang was a very wise and intelligent emperor. So it's not surprising that his burial turned out to be so huge. He was buried in the largest and most luxurious funeral complex in the history of China. The area the size of a small city contains many underground caves filled with things an emperor could need in the afterlife. In ancient China, as well as in ancient Egypt, people believed that when an emperor went to the other world, he could take with him those things that were buried with him. Unfortunately, sometimes it could be people, but Qin Shi Huang acted wisely and correctly. He decided to bury clay statues. But the coolest thing is that the architects and builders of this complex made it impregnable. The whole area holds many secrets, historical artifacts, and priceless objects. There's a beautiful place with the emperor's body in the center of this tomb. Imagine how many treasures you can find there, and all of them were meant to remain untouched and unseen by other people. And we probably won't be able to get to them, at least in the near future. Ancient Chinese historian Sima Qian wrote something about the tomb about 100 years after the emperor's burial. He said that this place had dangerous traps inside the tomb that would destroy anyone who dared to enter the tomb. The engineers installed crossbows with loaded arrows and also poured a huge amount of mercury, simulating the movement of rivers. Of course, that was 2,000 years ago, and crossbows probably don't work anymore. But what about mercury? This toxic metal has no expiration date. It's shiny and moves quickly in liquid form. It looks beautiful, but don't touch it. even a small drop of mercury can cause damage to your body. Inhalation of its vapors or ingestion causes damage to nerves, the liver, kidneys, and many other symptoms. And that's just one drop. Imagine how dangerous rivers of this substance can be. Who knows how much mercury was loaded there by the tomb builders? But even if you dodge all the traps and don't end up in the poisonous river, mercury would still be able to harm you. Its vapors can pass through the cracks in the walls. This means that the entire tomb is probably soaked in this substance. And by the way, this is not just a guess. Scientists have measured the mercury level at the excavation site and found that it's much higher than normal. But why mercury? In ancient China, mercury was considered the elixir of youth, the source of immortality. According to the records, Qin Shi Huang often took pills with this element. Perhaps this was the reason that his life ended at the age of 49. In any case, people can damage ancient structures and artifacts during excavations. For example, archaeologists caused great damage to Tutankhamun's tomb during its exploration. You dig around, but then suddenly the entrance collapses and you destroy vases, scrolls, interior decorations, and other stuff. But even if you do everything carefully, the writing and drawings on the walls can be destroyed by sunlight or oxygen. Places where there has been no fresh air and ultraviolet radiation for thousands of years have their own chemical composition that can be damaged by contact with the outside world. In the 1970s, when archaeologists were excavating terracotta sculptures, the paint pigment fell off the statues because of contact with the sun and air. Fortunately, the archaeologists quickly adapted and created a technology that allowed them to get the statues out without damaging the paint. It was a long and careful process, but it was worth it, and here's why. According to ancient writings, the emperor created an underground kingdom with a beautiful palace in the center. He decorated the ceiling of this palace with expensive pearls. You know why? To simulate the stars in the night sky. And that's just the ceiling. It's difficult to imagine how the walls, floor, and tomb of the emperor are decorated. Besides, scientists expect to find many other statues that copy the emperor's servants. So, in simple terms, the tomb of Qin Shi Huang is a paradise for archaeologists and historians. But of course, it will take more than one generation before they extract all the treasures. Some experts predict that the excavation of the entire tomb could take centuries. But of course, new archaeological technologies can change everything. For example, non-invasive research methods mean you don't have to enter the tomb. You can see it through a special device. Another idea is the use of muons. Those are subatomic products that appear as a result of the collision of cosmic rays and atoms in the Earth's atmosphere. The point is that these muons can penetrate through solid objects, just like X-rays. Or how about nanotechnologies? Imagine millions of tiny digger robots climbing into a tomb and starting to scan the area. They transmit the data to a computer, and then scientists create a holographic model. It all sounds cool, but to be honest, the charm of archaeology is lost here. It's one thing when you carefully dig up some ancient artifact with your hands, see it with your own eyes, and scrupulously clean it from the ground. And it's completely different when you watch it on a computer screen. But in any case, technologies using muons or some kind of robots ensure people's safety. It's better if a computer falls into a trap than if it happens to an archaeologist. Archaeologists were looking for the long-lost tomb of Cleopatra when they found something that seemed too good to be real. Roughly 43 feet underground beneath a ruined Egyptian temple, there was a perfectly straight tunnel, carved through solid sandstone. The tunnel is over 4,200 feet long, and so precise that experts called it a geometric miracle. The tunnel sits beneath an ancient city west of Alexandria, near Egypt's Mediterranean coast. The team that found it carefully peeled back layers of stone and debris until they hit this passage, about 6.5 feet tall, cut cleanly into bedrock. There were no collapse marks or wandering curves, just precision. If you've ever tried to drill a straight hole into a wall at home and failed within seconds, imagine doing this underground for nearly a mile. Ancient builders had no GPS, no lasers, no modern surveying tools. Yet, this tunnel stays remarkably level over its entire length. That means they understood gradients, angles, and distance in a way that goes far beyond stack stones and hope. Engineers today rely on machines to maintain that kind of accuracy underground. These people relied on knowledge, repetition, and patience. Parts of the tunnel now sit underwater or collapsed, probably after several earthquakes that struck the region centuries ago. Some experts think the tunnel may have once connected the temple to water sources or ritual areas closer to the sea. Archaeologists noticed that the Egyptian tunnel is an exact replica of the Eupalinos tunnel in Greece. It's believed to be one of the most important engineering achievements of antiquity, which only makes the Egyptian tunnel more special. Underground passages in ancient Greece linked temples to sacred springs. Back in ancient times, people moved through space in specific ways, underground and above, to reenact myths and journeys of gods. A tunnel like this could represent a path to the underworld, rebirth, or divine transition. Nobody would invest this much effort in construction just for decoration. Plus, in earlier digs at the site, archaeologists pulled up all kinds of artifacts, including coins with the names and faces of Cleopatra VII and Alexander the Great. They also found figurines, statues of deities, a mummy with a gold tongue, and even an entire cemetery packed with Greco-Roman style mummies. The perfect geometric tunnel isn't an isolated flex. Not far away, underwater archaeologists off the coast of Alexandria uncovered something that sounds like it belongs in a royal travel documentary. A 2,000-year-old pleasure boat that once glided along the Nile. And this wasn't just another fishing vessel or cargo barge. It likely stretched over 115 feet long and 23 feet wide, and had a decorated cabin, plus around 20 rowers, which turned the river into a moving palace. This isn't speculation pulled out of thin air. An ancient Greek geographer named Strabo wrote about these exact boats around the 1st century BCE. He described lavish vessels used by royalty during festivals and ceremonial outings in Alexandria. For years, historians treated that as a poetic exaggeration. Then, this wreck surfaced, and suddenly, Strabo sounded less like a storyteller and more like a witness. Even ancient art backs it up. The Palestrina mosaic from Italy shows richly decorated boats floating down the Nile. They match both the texts and the physical evidence almost perfectly. Inside the wreck, archaeologists found something small but incredibly human. Graffiti scratched into the wood in Greek. Just writing left behind by someone who stood on that deck 2,000 years ago. Researchers haven't fully decoded the text yet, but its existence alone matters. It tells us this wasn't just a floating symbol of power. People lived on it. It was sort of like a modern luxurious yacht, and the Nile was like a highway. All types of vessels with passengers were moving back and forth, visiting friends, carrying their goods for trade, doing business, and, of course, going on pleasure cruises. The location of the pleasure boat makes the story even better. The boat sat near the temple of Isis on Antirodos, an island that once hosted royal and religious buildings before earthquakes and rising seas erased it from the surface. That temple collapsed around 50 CE, and researchers believe the boat may have sunk during the same disaster. Another recent find that has to do with life on the Nile is the lower part of the massive worship complex about 10 miles southwest of Cairo. It connects directly to an upper temple dedicated to Ra, the Egyptian deity of the sun. The newly excavated part is a 4,500-year-old valley temple. The upper temple sits on higher ground, and archaeologists excavated it years ago. The valley temple is closer to the Nile, and it's connected to the upper part by a causeway. A German Egyptologist actually started excavating part of the temple back in 1901, but the groundwater sat much higher then, and he had to stop. Now, the groundwater level is lower, and a modern team has managed to excavate about half of the valley temple since 2024. Once they got in, archaeologists uncovered the remains of a columned entrance portico. Then they found blocks carved with a calendar of religious events, almost like an ancient public schedule. The text includes feasts for Sokar, a falcon-headed deity linked to Memphis, which was a major capital during the Old Kingdom, plus the festival of Min, a fertility deity, and even the procession of Ra. The calendar blocks all showed up around the entrance portico area, which most definitely means that the outside facade of the temple displayed this long feast calendar publicly. That's why archaeologists think this might be one of the earliest examples of a true public calendar ever found. A literal event list for an entire community, built into the architecture. On top of that, the team found dozens of decorated blocks covered in inscriptions that named a pharaoh who ruled around 2420 to 2389 BCE and had the temple built. This temple shows how people moved through ancient Egypt. Because the upper temple handled the main worship, but the valley temple made the whole place accessible. It acted like the landing area for boats coming in, either directly from the Nile or more likely from one of its side channels. So instead of hiking across desert terrain, visitors could arrive by water, step onto the temple's landing stage, enter through the valley temple, then head up the causeway ramp toward the upper temple on the hill. After about a century of use, researchers found that the valley temple had been repurposed into a residential area. And the best part is, what they found from that era: 2 wooden pieces used for playing Senet, an ancient board game. Senet shows up at other Egyptian sites too, including King Tutankhamun's tomb, but nobody fully agrees on the rules today. Some discoveries in Egypt create new mysteries instead of solving the old ones. Earlier in 2025, archaeologists announced the discovery of the first pharaoh's burial found in or near the Valley of Kings since King Tut's tomb in 1922. The newly found tomb of Thutmose II flooded almost immediately after burial. Ancient officials rushed in, removed the mummy and most of the grave goods, and hid them somewhere else. The weirdest part is that an alabaster ointment jar inside the tomb links the burial directly to Hatshepsut, Thutmose II's wife and half-sister. The inscription basically says she made this monument for him, which proves she arranged his burial. But it still doesn't explain why she placed him here and later chose the Valley of the Kings for herself. Now, archaeologists are studying a huge mound of rubble near the tomb, about 75 feet tall, and suspect it was built to hide something important. If a second tomb sits underneath, it could be complete and undisturbed. So, the deeper the archaeologists dig, the more ancient Egypt stops feeling like a gone civilization and starts feeling like a paused one. Looks like it didn't just survive time, it outsmarted it. And we're only just beginning to catch up. There's something absolutely massive and deeply unsettling hiding right next to Stonehenge. More than a dozen giant pits carved into the ground. They're all spaced with eerie precision and form a perfect circle, more than a mile wide. For years, nobody could explain them. They were too big to be animal traps, too organized to be natural sinkholes, and way too deliberate to be random. And the biggest question was, who had the power, knowledge, and reason to reshape the land on this scale 4,000 years ago? So these pits surround a place called Durrington Walls, a huge Neolithic settlement just a short walk from Stonehenge. Archaeologists now say humans dug them around 2500 BCE, during the late Neolithic period, when people supposedly lived simple farming lives without metal tools, written language, or modern math. Each pit stretches about 30 feet across and plunges roughly 15 feet down, and together they form an almost flawless ring. To prove the pits weren't natural, scientists went full detective mode. They drilled soil cores and tested the dirt itself, including microscopic traces of ancient DNA and something called luminescence dating, which tells you when the soil last saw sunlight. Every test pointed to the same answer. Humans made these pits on purpose. Here's where it gets wild. The pits weren't dug randomly as people moved along. They were laid out as a single unified project. That means Neolithic builders had to visualize a massive circle, measure distances across open land, and coordinate teams over a huge area without any GPS, drones, or even aerial maps. All they had were people, ropes, wooden tools, and shared knowledge. So why would they invest so much effort and do this? Archaeologists think the pits formed part of a ritual landscape, not a practical one. Durrington Walls already looks like a place where people gathered for ceremonies, feasts, and seasonal events. The pit circle may have marked a sacred boundary. It could have separated ordinary land from a spiritually charged space. Some researchers think the pits symbolized a border between the world of the living and the underworld. The scale of the structure is pretty impressive. It may be one of the largest prehistoric monuments ever built in Britain, even bigger than Stonehenge itself when you look at the total area. And unlike Stonehenge's towering rocks, this monument stayed invisible for thousands of years, quietly hiding under the grass. Generations walked over it without knowing they were standing inside a gigantic ancient design. For a long time, we underestimated ancient people. We imagined them reacting to nature instead of shaping it. But discoveries like this keep proving that wrong. The builders of Durrington Walls didn't just live in the landscape, but engineered it. They thought in terms of geometry, symbolism, and long-term meaning. And this isn't the only case. All over the world, thanks to new technology, scientists keep finding proof that ancient humans worked on massive scales with shocking precision. In the Amazon rainforest, researchers found traces of 2,500-year-old cities hiding beneath the jungle canopy. Scientists spent more than 20 years exploring the area on foot before technology finally cracked the case. The LiDAR technology, which is like X-ray vision that surveys a landscape using lasers to digitally peel away the jungle, scanned a massive area of over 100 square miles. It helped to spot more than 6,000 rectangular earthen platforms, which are likely used as homes or public buildings. They also found agricultural terraces, drainage systems, and carefully shaped farmland. This wasn't a random settlement. It was well planned. At least 15 distinct settlements appeared, all connected by wide, straight roads that cut cleanly through the landscape. These roads didn't follow rivers or slopes as you'd expect. They crossed each other at perfect right angles, forming a grid. The researchers believe people from the Quilomope and Upanu cultures lived there between about 500 BCE and 300 to 600 CE. They farmed corn and sweet potatoes, reshaped the land, and built a system that lasted for centuries. Discoveries like this prove something huge. Far more people lived in the Amazon than scientists ever thought. Tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands. And they didn't just survive there, they engineered the landscape. Just like at Durrington Walls, the real story hid in plain sight until technology caught up. Then there's Peru, with one of archaeology's biggest headaches, the Nazca lines. These gigantic designs of animals, plants, and geometric shapes stretch across the earth like an ancient message, so huge that only birds or satellites can see them properly. For decades, people have tried to figure out why the Nazca people made them, how they did it, and what those massive patterns mean. And until recently, the mystery stayed stubbornly unsolved. Walking the desert or flying over it, archaeologists would spot lines and figures and wonder if anything was missing. But the ones already known were just the tip of the iceberg. Traditional fieldwork, with people on the ground slowly mapping things out by hand, took forever. And even then, dozens of smaller designs were just too faint for the unassisted eye. So, instead of scanning the desert on foot, researchers taught artificial intelligence how to see patterns in aerial and drone imagery. They fed terabytes of pictures into trained models, and AI began flagging shapes, curves, and ancient outlines that had been hiding for centuries. In just about 6 months, it identified 303 previously unknown geoglyphs in the Nazca Desert. It almost doubled the number of figures we knew before and showed entire classes of designs. Some of these new shapes are tiny, just a few feet across, but they sit next to giant ones like the hummingbird or monkey. Thanks to all the new finds, scientists can finally start testing theories they had about the purpose of the lines. It looks like the lines weren't just decorations. Many may have been walkways or routes used for ceremonial movement. In case you're worried, AI isn't replacing archaeologists. They still check every promising lead on the ground and interpret everything the machines find. Back in Britain, the pit circle also connects to an even older structure, an early Neolithic site called Robin Hood's Ball. Because it stood so far from the famous stones, it felt like a side character. But it turns out Robin Hood's Ball is from around 3600 BCE, which makes it about 500 years older than Stonehenge itself. It's what archaeologists call a causewayed enclosure, which sounds fancy but really means a big circular earthwork made of ditches and banks. Instead of one clean trench, the ditches are broken into short segments with little gaps in between. And instead of keeping people out, it probably brought them together. Archaeologists think these enclosures worked as gathering places, spots for meetings, feasts, rituals, and social bonding among the first farming communities. Then came the twist no one expected. While preparing land at Lark Hill, a hillside northeast of Stonehenge, for new military housing, archaeologists found signs of another causewayed enclosure. This discovery flipped the map upside down. The landscape wasn't growing outward from Stonehenge, it was already alive long before the stones ever went up. As researchers dug deeper, they found hundreds of flint tools, beautifully made leaf-shaped arrowheads, chunks of human skull, and pieces of antler, likely used as digging tools. Then came the pottery. Different styles showed up in different places, some from the enclosure ditches, others from nearby pits. That matters because pottery styles often act like cultural fingerprints. The mix suggests something big. Different groups of people were visiting the same place and brought their own traditions, tools, and objects with them. All of this changes how we see Stonehenge. The stones didn't appear out of nowhere. They rose in a landscape already loaded with meaning, memory, and movement. Every new discovery like the ones near Stonehenge, in the Amazon jungle and Peru, forces archaeologists to rewrite textbooks and the whole world to rethink the idea of progress. It turns out that ancient people made up for the absence of steel and electricity with observation, creativity, and shared meaning. It started as a routine cleaning to scoop some mud off the coast of Indonesia, but turned into a discovery of remnants of a lost, submerged, Ice Age landmass. Archaeologists found more than 6,000 fossil fragments, and among them, 140,000-year-old Homo erectus remains. This find made scientists rethink how early humans lived, moved, and interacted in Southeast Asia. For years, they thought that Homo erectus on Java Island lived in isolation, separated from the rest of the world. But these dredged fossils blew that story apart. It turns out Java wasn't an island at all back then, but part of a landmass called Sundaland. So, Southeast Asia stretched out like someone had drained the ocean, connecting Indonesia, Malaysia, Borneo, Thailand, and Vietnam into one gigantic landscape. Today's islands of Java, Sumatra, Borneo, and Bali were connected by river systems that probably looked like the Amazon, by forests where giant animals roamed, and by coastal plains that would later sink beneath the ocean when temperatures went up. And Homo erectus were not stuck. They were thriving in what honestly sounds like prehistoric bliss. Yep, it was nothing like we normally imagine Ice Age, a sort of frozen wasteland. Sea levels dropped more than 400 feet because so much water froze into glaciers. When all that water got locked up in ice, whole sections of the ocean floor popped out of the water like stepping stones. Suddenly, early humans didn't need boats. They could literally walk from what's now mainland Southeast Asia all the way to places that are islands today. They could do it while exploring and chasing herds across open land. It was sort of like a giant prehistoric highway system. That giant highway matters because it completely rewrites how early humans moved around. Instead of being trapped, Homo erectus had a whole continent to roam. They followed rivers, crossed valleys, and adapted to different environments the same way you learn shortcuts to the office or find new routes to your favorite coffee shop. And because everything was connected, animals wandered freely too. Tigers, elephants, supersized cows, and turtles the size of small cars. People followed these big animals. this among the fossils pulled from the Madura Strait, such as cut-marked turtle shells and cracked open bovid bones. When you see precise cut marks on bone, it means someone was deliberately carving meat off the bone with tools they made themselves. And cracked bones mean they were taking out marrow, which was like prehistoric energy gel, rich, fatty, and perfect when you need calories to survive. That's a level of planning and skill scientists didn't expect from Homo erectus. It pushes Homo erectus closer to species like early Homo sapiens and Denisovans when it comes to behavior. It means they weren't just surviving on scraps, they were actively pursuing animals, processing, and maybe even sharing food the same way later humans did. So if you imagine them as slow, hunched cavemen, forget that. These people were sharp. The techniques they used to process food look eerily similar to those used by other hominins. Not just Homo erectus, we're talking Homo floresiensis, Denisovans, and early Homo sapiens. That opens the door to the possibility that these groups didn't just exist side by side. They might have interacted. Maybe they traded ideas and copied techniques. Or maybe they even interbred or shared territories. All this makes Southeast Asia look not like a series of isolated islands, but like a buzzing human ecosystem, a place where different human species crossed paths. And here's the heartbreaking part. Everything we know about this place, everything humans built, lost, and discovered there, is all underwater now. When the Ice Age ended, glaciers melted like forgotten ice cream cones on a hot sidewalk. Sea levels rose. Slowly, then quickly, rivers flooded, coastlines vanished. Entire human landscapes disappeared beneath the waves. Sundaland drowned over thousands of years, and the people who lived there either adapted or moved to higher ground. Archaeologists now try to interpret what these people did, how they lived, and how many human species walked that land. Every time they pull together bone or artifact from the seabed, we get one step closer to rewriting everything we thought we knew about early human migration. And the new discovery could mean that Southeast Asia may have been just as important to human evolution as Africa, the Middle East, or Europe. Looks like Sundaland wasn't a side quest, but a real mixing zone, a place where humanity experimented, adapted, learned, and evolved. Unexpected finds like this one in Indonesia keep popping up around the world and surprising scientists. Farmers in China were hoping to scoop up bat droppings for natural fertilizers inside a narrow limestone cave. But instead, they spotted pieces of fossilized bone that looked suspiciously like parts of a human skull. This skull turned out to be ridiculously old, around 300,000 years old. Scientists eventually named the fossil Maba 1. The discovery happened way back in 1958, but ever since then, nobody could agree on which ancient human species this skull belonged to. During the late Middle Pleistocene, the world was basically a crowded highway of different ancient human species wandering around. Or just maybe, Maba 1 came from a species we've never met before. The big issue was that researchers only found part of the skull, no jaw, no other bones. So it was like trying to solve a giant puzzle with half the pieces missing. For ages, scientists guessed it might be Neanderthal. But now they've used micro-CT scanning, which is like an X-ray superpower that lets you peek inside fossils without breaking them. That's when they noticed weird tube-like structures connecting parts of the brain case, something Neanderthals basically never had. The inside shape of the skull looked way more like Homo erectus, a much older human species. But even that wasn't a perfect match. The skull's size and shape were closer to modern humans and Neanderthals, and it showed traits Homo erectus usually didn't have. For example, it had a shorter forehead area and a thickened bregma, the meeting point between two skull bones. Maba 1 also had a strange dent on the forehead, almost like a bruise frozen in time. Whatever caused it, maybe a fall, maybe anemia, it happened while the person was alive. But there was no sign of infection, so that individual probably healed and kept living after whatever hit them. So Maba 1 doesn't match any known species perfectly, but it shares features with several and has a similar mystery fossil vibe as others found across Africa. In 1976, a famous paleontologist and her team found another human-like skull in Tanzania. That skull had features that looked surprisingly similar to Homo sapiens, even though it was unbelievably old. Scientists think it may be one of the earliest examples of our species ever discovered. That means this skull could help solve one of science's biggest questions. When exactly did Homo sapiens first show up? The sediment layer where that skull was found goes all the way back to the Middle Pleistocene. That's way earlier than what old textbooks used to claim about when modern humans appeared. And then there's the skull that turned up in Zambia's Broken Hill ore mine. Miners literally stumbled on it, plus a few other bones, completely by accident. Scientists started calling it Rhodesian Man, and at first, everyone thought it might be the big missing link between Homo erectus and Homo sapiens. But with newer research tools and better dating methods, they discovered it's around 299,000 years old and probably belonged to someone from the species Homo heidelbergensis. Every new fossil acts like a missing puzzle piece on the giant, chaotic story of human evolution. Each one helps scientists connect species that once seemed unrelated, redraw family trees, and rewrite chapters of our past we didn't even know were wrong.
Well, get this. Scientists could bring Neanderthals back to life within the next 20 years. Not as fossils, not as simulations, but as actual living beings. And no, this isn't a sci-fi movie pitch, but a real debate happening right now in genetics labs and ethics panels around the world. The DNA has already been decoded, and the only thing standing between us and a living Neanderthal is whether we should do it, not whether we can. So let's get some things clear. Neanderthals weren't cavemen dragging clubs around as cartoons taught us. They were just like humans, our close cousins, who lived across Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. They cared for injured members of their society, made tools, wore clothing, and survived scary Ice Age conditions that would wreck most modern humans. Then, around 35,000 years ago, they vanished. No one fully agrees on why. Changes in temperatures, competition with Homo sapiens, health issues, or interbreeding. All of it probably played a role. The reason this resurrection talk even exists is that scientists finished sequencing the entire Neanderthal genome back in 2010. It's like an instruction manual written in DNA, telling a body how to grow, function, and survive. Now, once you have that manual, the question shifts from what were Neanderthals like to could we rebuild one? This is where CRISPR enters the story. It's a gene editing tool that works like molecular scissors. It lets scientists cut DNA at precise spots and replace sections with different genetic code. They already use it to study health conditions, edit embryos in animals, and even modify human stem cells in labs. Now, in theory, scientists could take human stem cells and slowly replace modern human DNA with Neanderthal DNA, piece by piece. One famous geneticist from Harvard says it could happen within a couple of decades. He doesn't mean that copying a Neanderthal straight from a fossil, because ancient DNA is too damaged for that. Instead, his idea is to take human DNA and slowly change it piece by piece until it matches Neanderthal DNA. So it wouldn't be a copy from the past, but a modern human body rebuilt using Neanderthal instructions. Whoa! Scientists are willing to go through all that because they want answers to questions like why Neanderthals disappeared and we survived. How did their brains work compared to ours? Did they think differently, feel differently, or process language in unique ways? A living Neanderthal could answer questions that bones and fossils never can. Some researchers even think this could help modern medicine. Since Neanderthal genes influence immunity, metabolism, and inflammation, studying a full Neanderthal biology could reveal why certain conditions hit humans the way they do today. So, in a strange way, reviving them could help us. But all this excitement hits a wall made of ethics. A Neanderthal wouldn't just be a lab mouse, it would be a person. That single fact flips the entire project upside down. You can't treat a person like an experiment, even if science really wants answers. Being the only Neanderthal on Earth would be tough, to say the least. They'd have to live with no culture, no community, no one who would want to truly share their biology. They'd grow up surrounded by modern humans who would study them non-stop and forever label them as an experiment. So, critics of the idea are sure that kind of isolation could cause serious psychological damage. There's also the issue of consent, which the experiment would completely break. No Neanderthal can agree to being born into a modern world, raised by humans, studied for life, and used as proof of a theory. Consent is crucial in medical ethics, and you can't even test meds without it. Cloning a human ancestor would break that rule. Now, if we forget about ethics, there are also serious biological risks. No one knows how a reconstructed Neanderthal genome would behave in a modern human womb. Pregnancy alone could be dangerous. Development might not follow expectations. Immune reactions could go wrong. Even small genetic mismatches can cause massive problems when you're building a whole human from scratch, And even if everything worked out, the results might disappoint. One individual couldn't recreate Neanderthal society, and behavior comes from culture as much as DNA. Without a full population, the answers we get could be shallow, misleading, or incomplete. The debate on whether we should or should not bring back Neanderthals is so intense because the possibility of doing so is very real. Genetic engineering keeps accelerating, and the tools keep getting cheaper, faster, and more precise. Right now, no lab has approval to try this. No Neanderthal embryo exists. But scientists, ethicists, and state officials already argue about rules, limits, and red lines, which is another proof of how close it feels. It also brings up the big question of whether scientific curiosity has limits and who gets to decide them. Right now, there's no law that bans resurrecting extinct humans. Once one country allows it, others could follow, faster than the rules can keep up. And then, there are scientists who counter all this with a different argument. What if not doing it is also unethical? They point out that we already revive extinct animals, manipulate genomes, and alter life at the deepest level. Understanding Neanderthals could help modern humans survive future climate shifts or mass health disorders. If Neanderthals thrived in extreme conditions, their biology could hold survival clues we desperately need. From that perspective, if we refuse to explore this knowledge, it could cost the world many lives someday. If all this doesn't touch your heart at all because you have nothing to do with Neanderthals, here's a surprise for you. When you look in the mirror, you're probably staring at a tiny piece of one of them. It could literally be in your DNA. According to a study from a couple of years ago, Neanderthals didn't just vanish into thin air, but blended into us. Modern humans, whose ancestors migrated out of Africa, carry about 1 to 4% of Neanderthal DNA. Scientists only have a handful of high-quality Neanderthal genomes to study, just 3 really solid ones. They come from bones found in a cave in Croatia that are about 50,000 to 65,000 years old, plus 2 others from Eurasia dating to around 80,000 and 50,000 years ago. That's not a lot to work with, which means every new discovery matters a lot. Every person has 2 versions of each gene, one from mom and one from dad. When 2 very different groups mix, their offspring end up with more genetic variety. The scientists compared DNA from those 3 Neanderthals with genetic data from about 2,000 modern humans. What they found was shocking. Neanderthals themselves may have carried up to 3.7% modern human DNA. So Neanderthals weren't just mixing into us, we were mixing into them too. Roughly 1 out of every 30 Neanderthal parents may have been a modern human. And this didn't happen just once. The DNA shows at least 2 big periods of mixing. One happened around 200 to 250,000 years ago, and another around 100 to 120,000 years ago. There may have been more, but DNA is like a blurry photo. The older the event, the harder it is to see clearly. According to another recent study, Most Neanderthal DNA in modern humans came from one long, intense mixing period about 47,000 years ago that lasted nearly 7,000 years. That's generations growing up together. This lines up with real bones, too. Scientists found skulls about 100,000 years old in Middle Eastern caves that look mostly like modern humans, but with thick brows and other Neanderthal-style features. Sadly, it looks like Neanderthals had a much smaller population than scientists thought. This makes it harder for them to stay genetically separate. As waves of modern humans kept moving out of Africa and mixing with them, Neanderthals didn't disappear, but dissolved into the larger human population. So, Neanderthals didn't lose the game of evolution. They're part of us. It's something worth keeping in mind when you think about the ethical side of bringing back one of them.